And welcome you back to 757 Saturday Sports Talk, powered by CoVA Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Wherever you are tuning in, we thank you for doing so. We have a special guest with us here as we break down all the madness of March here, college basketball style. You've heard him for many, many years in the sporting news. Also does some work for Fox Sports, Big Ten Network Studio Analyst. You can follow him on Twitter or the X at TSN Mike. We're joined by Michael DeCourcy here with us on the program. Mike, thank you so much for stopping by. It's the fun time of year, college basketball in full swing. You got to be pumped for all the action. I know you've been on the move watching some games too, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. I was in Raleigh on Friday for the games that were played there. They weren't all spectacular games. Obviously, we have 2 1 seeds, so you don't expect them all to be great. But the UConn game against Oklahoma was highly competitive, and Mississippi State made a nice little comeback on Baylor to make that game interesting, at least more interesting in the final score than maybe it was as it was played. But getting a chance to see VJ Edgecombe in person, nice, really terrific player. Jeremiah Fears, I absolutely love him as a player. He's fantastic. So got to see some terrific players. And, of course, you can never complain on a day when you get to watch the great Cooper Flagg.
Yeah, there have been some special freshmen, guys like Flagg and Edgecombe and Trey Johnson of Texas, whose team went out early getting beat by Xavier. But I want to start there, Mike, because there's so many great storylines. What are your early takeaways here 2 days in as the tournament field has shrunk from 64 teams to 32 left?
Well, obviously we're seeing more of the top seeded teams be successful. And the reality is that's because with a few exceptions, Carolina's inclusion, Louisville's 8 seed, with a very few exceptions, the committee has gotten better at seeding. The Louisville seed, I still can't explain it. I don't know if they go home, if they're playing against, say, if they'd been a 5 or a 6, they'd have played a 12 or a 13. I don't know that they would have gone home in that circumstance. But an 8-9 game against a team like Creighton, they were the lesser team. Any team that plays against Ryan Kalkbrenner has a chance of being a lesser team. And in that case, they were. But the committee's getting better at seeding. It has happened over the years. The inclusion of North Carolina remains indefensible. I don't care that they won their first 4 games. The inclusion was never justifiable on any level, and putting them in damaged the committee's credibility. But that doesn't necessarily mean it damaged their efficacy. In reality, the seeds. I got the first 3 lines and the last 4 lines, all each team exactly where they would be. Maybe not on the exact place on the seed list, but in the exact seed line, I was able to get that because the data and the results talk to you. You can see it if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and you've been doing it well for an awful long time. Mike, the Big Ten is a perfect 8-0 through the round of 64 as we go to the round of 32 this weekend. Is that more about the higher seeds here, or is it fair to say it's on the level of the great SEC, which has been billed to be the best conference in the history of college basketball? What do you make of it so far, being a perfect 8-0?
Yeah, first of all, I think the Big Ten has done very well. To be 8-0, even though they were the higher seeded team in every game, it's not easy to pull off. We saw higher seeds lose in other circumstances, not many, but a few. And so that's a great run for the Big Ten. But today and Sunday are the crucial days. They're the ones that decide which teams really have a chance to compete for the championship. And so it's really important for those teams to go out and do well. And Michigan State did not play great for the first 25 minutes against Bryant, but then really took over and played fantastically down the stretch. Illinois was very good from the jump and outstanding in the second half. Will Riley, a player that I really love and have talked about a lot this year on the Big Ten Network, did a phenomenal job for the Fighting Illini. I think the big hopes for the Big Ten remain Michigan State and Maryland. Wisconsin's game against BYU will be fascinating because BYU is a team that I have selected to go to the Elite 8. I think they're really dangerous. But Wisconsin at its best can certainly deal with them.
I'm with you completely, Mike. I love that BYU-Wisconsin matchup with the shooters on the floor for both sides. And you're right. I think we've seen some uneven performances for stretches for some of the 1 and 2 seeds like an Auburn and Alabama, a St. John's, and a Michigan State. I want to start with the storyline that's certainly getting a lot of the talk around the water coolers and all over the country. The coaching clash between John Calipari, Arkansas, and Rick Pitino, St. John's. What do you make of that, and how juicy is that for you that's covered a sport for more than 3 decades?
Well, having known both coaches, especially John. I mean, I've known John since he was an assistant at Pitt in the mid '80s, and he's a fellow Pittsburgher. So there is a connection there. And John's been very good to me through the course of my career. I still remember one of my favorite memories of the NCAA tournament was the night before these two met in the NCAA tournament for the first time. The UMass team went out to dinner in, is it South Philly where all the Italian restaurants are? I apologize for not knowing my geography.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we went out to dinner in an Italian restaurant in that portion of the city, and invited me to go along. And it was really an interesting experience to watch the players interact. A couple of the guys on that team were also from Pittsburgh, so I knew them from covering them in high school. And it was a really cool experience. And then the next night, they gave Kentucky a heck of a run. As this team from UMass, full of no-star prospects, they gave Kentucky a heck of a run. And ultimately, one of the deciding factors in the game was a fairly egregious technical called against John from all the way across the floor because he jumped out of the coaching box. He was feigning, like mimicking a over-the-back call that he didn't get, that the Minutemen didn't get, and jumped over the line. And Lenny Wirtz, an official who worked the SEC then, called the technical from way on the opposite side of the floor. John was on the far corner bench, and the action was down at the left, this side of the court where I was stationed, and Lenny was right in front of me, and he called the tech. That helped get UMass beat in that game, and then Kentucky went on to play in the great Duke game that Christian Laettner won. I guess if Lenny hadn't called that tech, we might never have seen that shot.
That's a great story. I'm sure you could share stories upon stories with those two guys, Calipari and Pitino, and their decorated careers. And that leads me to my next question, Mike. Which of the five, I think it's just five remaining double-digit seeds, has the best chance to punch its ticket to the Sweet 16? We all love Cinderellas. McNeese State plays Purdue. Colorado State takes on the Terps of Maryland. New Mexico, Rick Pitino's son Richard, the Lobos, in action against Michigan State. You also have Arkansas playing St. John's, we just touched on. And Drake, you can't forget about them. They're a number 11 seed taking on Texas Tech, a number 3 seed today. Which one do you like the most potentially to keep moving on?
I think when you make those decisions, part of it comes about from which of the higher seeds do you like the least. And out of that group, I kind of like Texas Tech the least. No offense, I like the team, but they are a little inconsistent. And I think you could probably put Purdue in that category as well. Purdue McNeese, I think Purdue's had a chance to see what McNeese has to offer, and I think they're a little bit better equipped to deal with the zone than Clemson was, and now they've seen that as well, so they also know it's coming. I'm not sure Clemson really had a feel for what they were going to see because they played as if they'd never seen a zone in all their time. So I will probably go with that, but I think that we're going to see a fairly chalky type. I think we're going to see a fairly chalky type Sweet 16, and maybe, like I said, a BYU gets in there from a power conference, but I don't think we're going to see a ton of the mid-majors in the Sweet 16, owing to the fact that so many of the top mid-major players now are not staying at those schools beyond their first or second year, or even their third if they get the chance to make some money in their fourth season. You're seeing a lot more of them migrate toward the upper levels, and that certainly had an impact on the performance of the mid-majors.
That's a great point. And I know while there's still a lot of excitement, we're still looking for that first buzzer beater, that first overtime game of the tournament, Mike. And the chalk could certainly lead itself to maybe the second ever Final Four where all number 1 seeds get there. If Auburn and Duke, as well as Florida and Houston, are able to make it there, which brings me to certainly the possibility. I mean, you've got a chance to see Duke up close and personal in Raleigh with Cooper Flagg now back after his injury. You got a chance to see Florida against Norfolk State, a team from our backyard, which certainly battled valiantly after the haymakers that the Gators threw. My goodness, out of the gate. But Robert Jones' Spartans were trying to hang tough there, keep from getting totally out of reach where it was getting above 30 plus, 40 plus. They got it down to about 20 or so. Do you think we're in a collision course with 1 seeds to the Final Four, maybe even a Gators-Duke matchup in the title game?
The Gators Duke thing, yes, that's what I had at the start. It felt like after I watched them last night that I'd been in the gym with the two teams that I trusted most to win the championship. But I would watch out today for Gonzaga versus Houston. That's a very compelling 8-1 game because Gonzaga played their metrics were always very attractive, especially the predictive metrics. They were always very attractive relative to their season, and they played that way. I was having a discussion on Twitter the other night with Bart Torvik, who does such a terrific job with the T-Rank predictive metrics site and so many other wonderful things about his metric site. He was saying that he thought it was kind of unfair for Houston to have to play a team that basically had 2 seed metrics in the second round. And I said, yeah, but I mean, you watch them. Gonzaga played like that all year long until they got to the WCC tournament. I mean, every time I turned on the game, a game that Gonzaga was involved in, I was disappointed every single time. And sometimes they won and sometimes they lost, but they never impressed until they got to WCC tournament. And now they're starting to play like the talent that's assembled suggests, and the coach, I should mention that, one of the great coaches in the history of the game, between that and the players you had assembled, it should have been a more effective team during the year. Finally, it looks like it is. And I would say that Houston has a real concern there. That's a team with great size, with shooting, with ball handling, with experience, and now they're starting to play like all of that combined. So I'm very intrigued by that second round game with Houston. I don't think that these 1 seeds as a group are of the sort that we had in 2014 or 2015. When we had 3 get to the Final Four, and we would have had 4 if the committee hadn't misseeded Arizona and used Villanova as the one in the East instead. We would have had 4 number 1s that year. I'm convinced of it. And then in 2008, of course, the time we got all 4 of them there, and Kansas prevailed over Memphis in the end.
Yeah, I'm with you completely, Mike. I mean, my goodness, even though Gonzaga only hit 1 3, St. Mary's made none of that West Coast championship game. And 18 with Mark Few coaching it, Nemhard at the point, the best assist man in the country. Graham Ike inside is dangerous. And these 1-8 matchups in the second round, we wouldn't have believed people that told us we'd have a Florida-UConn matchup second round and Gonzaga-Houston second round. This feels like Elite 8 level games if both teams played at their calibers. I'll get you on this one. We thank you so much for coming on the program today. Read his work, by the way, Sporting News, sportingnews.com. He's on Twitter, X at TSN Mike, Fox Sports, Big Ten Network 2. The coaching carousel, it's always spinning. We got one that's been reported that's going to happen and be announced officially, I think, later today in a press conference on Monday with Ryan Odom back here in our home state, UVA. He's going to take that job after leading VC to the tournament, had that memorable moment. UMBC, we know about his dad, Dave, of course, coaching. There are some rumors about a couple of coaches in the tournament that could be linked to Villanova. Do you expect this carousel to be spinning all the way to the Final Four and as much as it usually does?
Well, I think it depends on where Villanova winds up, because if they were able to get someone that's in the tournament currently, and I know that Porter Moser is a name that's starting to be knocked around about that. I don't know whether that would be something of interest to him or not. It is certainly a terrific basketball job, but the standard is so high. Trying to meet what Jay Wright was able to do is not easy. Jay Wright is a phenomenal coach, one of the greatest we've seen over this century, and that's the concern. If you go there, you have to at least approach that, and that's not easy to do in any league, in any school, to do what Jay Wright did in his final 8 to 10 years at Villanova. So that's something that's out there, and the reason I mention that is because in the event that Porter were to take it, then that opens, and then et cetera on down the line. But I don't know what they're going to end up doing. We're going to see Virginia close. But interestingly, I wrote a column very critical of Will Wade and how he's handled the whole NC State possibility. And my column basically said, look, there's an adult way to do it. And I've got a lot of people coming back at me now that VCU is out and Ryan is slated to go to Virginia. Well, why aren't you criticizing him? Well, because he behaved exactly as you're supposed to. He behaved like an adult. He handled the situation. He allowed his people to do their jobs, their professional jobs. He's got agents, et cetera. They all do. And they went and they made sure that everything was in order for him to do it. And he never had to make this public circus but Will can't help himself. The circus is what he wants. So if you're going to have a circus, some people are going to criticize the circus.
Yeah, you're spot on there. Mike DeCourcy, he's one of the very best in the business. Check out his work, sportingnews.com, Fox Sports Big Ten Network. Thank you so much, my friend. Enjoy the Mania of March, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Matthew.
That's Mike DeCourcy with us here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. We'll take a time out. We've got more to come right here on the program. Make sure you hit the like button, the share button, and subscribe button right here on CoVA Sports TV. Stay tuned.